Woman returns from death after plane crash with a shocking message from heaven. What if your life was perfectly planned, full of love, hope, and dreams for the future, only to have it all ripped away in the blink of an eye? This is the story of Annette Herfkens, a woman whose life changed forever on a fateful day in 1992. She boarded a plane, hand in hand with her fiancé, her heart filled with excitement for a romantic getaway. She could never have imagined that this journey would take her to the edge of death and back, delivering a message so powerful that it would inspire millions. Annette wasn't just any passenger that day. She was a successful, driven young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She and her fiancé were madly in love, planning their future together. The trip to Vietnam was supposed to be a time of celebration, a moment to step away from the chaos of the world and revel in each other's company. The sun shone brightly as they boarded the small plane, an ordinary flight that promised extraordinary memories. But as the wheels lifted off the ground, destiny had other plans. The flight began uneventfully, the hum of the engines blending with the quiet chatter of passengers. Annette looked out the window, watching the lush green of the Vietnamese landscape fade into the horizon. She didn't know it yet, but this serene view would soon become the backdrop for unimaginable tragedy. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of unease, but she brushed it off. After all, how often do planes crash? The odds were almost non-existent, or so she thought. The first signs of trouble came subtly. A slight turbulence jostled the passengers, nothing out of the ordinary. Annette held her fiancé's hand, their fingers intertwined, sharing a comforting glance. But then the turbulence grew stronger. The plane shuddered violently, the overhead lights flickering. Panic rippled through the cabin like a wave. Annette's heart pounded, a deep sense of dread taking hold as the crew's reassuring voices struggled to calm the chaos. Suddenly, there was a deafening roar. The plane pitched violently downward and oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Screams filled the cabin as passengers clung to their seats, desperately trying to comprehend what was happening. Annette's mind raced. She thought of her family, her friends, her future. She thought of her fiancé, whose face was etched with fear. In that moment, she felt the fragility of life like never before. All she could do was hold on and pray. As the plane hurtled through the storm, Annette's world became a blur of chaos and noise. Lightning illuminated the cabin, and the wind roared like a wild beast. She whispered a prayer under her breath, words she hadn't spoken in years. In those terrifying moments, she realized how much she had taken for granted, the love she shared, the life she was building, and the simple gift of another breath. And then it happened. The plane plummeted, crashing violently into the dense Vietnamese jungle. The impact was catastrophic, shattering the aircraft into pieces. Darkness engulfed everything. Silence followed, a silence so profound it felt otherworldly. When Annette opened her eyes, she was surrounded by wreckage. The twisted metal of the plane lay scattered around her, along with the bodies of passengers who had been sitting beside her only moments ago. Her ears rang, her body ached, and the sheer devastation around her felt unreal. How could she be alive? Why her? As she lay there, the jungle around her eerily still, she had no idea what was to come. Annette Herfkens had survived the crash, but her true test was only just beginning. For 8 days, Annette lay in the wreckage of the crash, surrounded by the haunting reminders of what had happened. The heat of the Vietnamese jungle was oppressive, the air thick and suffocating. Her body was battered and bruised, her injuries were severe. She was weak, dehydrated, and in unimaginable pain. Every breath felt like a battle. But the physical agony was nothing compared to the emotional torment. She was alone, completely and utterly alone. The jungle was silent, too silent. Only her shallow breaths reminded her she was alive. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant calls of unseen animals. At night, the darkness was absolute, wrapping her like a suffocating blanket. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Was it hours? Days? She couldn't tell. She had no food, no water, and no clear understanding of whether help would ever come. The thought of rescue felt like a distant dream, fading with each passing moment. Annette tried to move, but every attempt sent waves of pain coursing through her body. She realized her best chance at survival was to remain still and conserve her energy. Her mind, however, wouldn't stop. Questions raced through her thoughts. Why had this happened? Why was she still alive when so many others weren't? Was there a reason, or was it all just some cruel twist of fate? Desperation set in as the hours turned into days. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and thirst became unbearable. At one point, she managed to collect rainwater in a shard of the plane's debris, taking small, desperate sips to keep herself alive. It wasn't enough. Her body was failing. She could feel it. Her strength was slipping away, and she knew she was teetering on the edge between life and death. But then something extraordinary happened. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, overcome by pain and exhaustion, she experienced a moment that would forever change her life. Annette felt herself leaving her body. The jungle, the wreckage, the suffering. It all seemed to dissolve. She was no longer lying on the ground, broken and battered. Instead, she was surrounded by light. A brilliant, warm, all-encompassing light that felt nothing like the harsh sunlight beating down on her in the jungle. This light was alive. It pulsed with energy and love, unlike anything she had ever known. Annette described feeling weightless, as if she had been freed from the physical burdens of her body. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as though she was exactly where she was meant to be. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, they were gone. In their place was a sense of profound connection, as if she were part of something infinitely greater than herself. And then she heard voices. Not the cold, distant voices of strangers, but warm, familiar ones. They were the voices of loved ones who had passed away, her grandparents, a childhood friend, and even a beloved teacher from years ago. They weren't speaking with words, yet she understood them perfectly. They were comforting her, assuring her that she was not alone and never would be. Amidst this experience, a powerful message was imprinted on her soul. It was clear, simple, and yet so profound it brought her to tears. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. You are not finished yet. You must go back. Annette didn't want to leave the light. She felt safe, embraced, and whole in a way she never had before. But she understood the message. It wasn't her time. There was something she still needed to do, something greater than herself. Suddenly she was back in the wreckage. The light was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of her situation. But she was different now. The physical pain was still there, but she felt an unshakable sense of calm. She had been given a second chance, and she knew she had to survive. Not for herself, but for the message she had received, for the love she had felt in that light, for the life she had yet to live. The jungle didn't seem as silent anymore. The rustling leaves, the distant calls, they weren't signs of danger. They were signs of life. Annette began to cling to the hope that rescue would come. She held onto the memory of that light, that peace, and that message. It was her anchor in the chaos, her reason to fight, even as her body begged her to give up. Her ordeal wasn't over, but her spirit had been renewed, and somewhere, deep within her, she believed she wasn't truly alone. After 8 grueling days in the jungle, Annette's body was on the verge of collapse. She had endured unimaginable pain, hunger, and thirst. Her injuries were infected, her strength almost entirely gone. She was fading, her survival hanging by the thinnest of threads. And yet, through it all, she held onto the memory of the light she had seen during her near-death experience. That light had told her she had a purpose. It had given her hope, and hope was the only thing keeping her alive. But as much as she tried to believe rescue would come, the reality of her situation was grim. The Vietnamese jungle was vast and impenetrable. The crash site was so remote that even sophisticated rescue teams might not find it for weeks, if at all. Annette knew she was a needle in a haystack, lost in an ocean of green. And as the hours dragged on, her faith began to waver. On the 8th day, the sound of the jungle shifted. It was subtle at first, distant voices carried by the wind, muffled and faint. Annette wasn't sure if she was hallucinating. After days of dehydration and delirium, it wouldn't have been surprising. But as the voices grew closer, her heart began to race. Could it be? Was it possible? She summoned every ounce of energy left in her broken body. With trembling hands, she tried to wave a piece of debris, hoping it would catch someone's attention. Her voice was hoarse and weak, but she managed a desperate cry, "Help! I'm here!" The effort drained her completely, leaving her breathless and dizzy. For a moment, there was silence. Then she heard it, a reply. Villagers from a nearby community had stumbled upon the crash site. They were local farmers who had ventured into the jungle to forage. They had no idea a plane had gone down nearby. They had simply been going about their daily lives. But fate, or perhaps something greater, had guided them to Annette. When they saw her, their faces were etched with a mix of shock and compassion. She was alive, but barely. Annette felt the warmth of human touch for the first time in days as the villagers carefully carried her out of the wreckage. She couldn't understand their language, but their actions spoke louder than words. They gave her water, gently tending to her wounds with the limited supplies they had. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was finally safe. She wasn't alone anymore. The villagers weren't just rescuers. They were her lifeline. As they approached her, Annette could see the shock and concern in their eyes. Their gestures were gentle but urgent, their voices soft and soothing as they spoke words she couldn't understand. Yet, no language barrier could mask the kindness in their actions. One older woman knelt beside Annette, offering water from a small makeshift container. Another man wrapped his scarf around her to shield her from the relentless sun. Though they were strangers, their compassion gave Annette a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in days. As they carried her through the jungle toward their village, Annette's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Gratitude, relief, disbelief. It was all overwhelming. She thought about her fiancé, the man she had loved so deeply, who hadn't survived the crash. She thought about the other passengers who had perished and the inexplicable fact that she was the only one left alive. Why her? Why had she been spared? Annette didn't have the answers, but she knew she had been given a second chance. And as she looked up at the sky through the canopy of trees, she silently thanked the light she had seen during her near-death experience. She promised herself she wouldn't waste the life she had been given. After her rescue, Annette was taken to a hospital where doctors and nurses were stunned by her story. Her survival was nothing short of miraculous. Despite severe injuries, dehydration, and exposure to the elements, she had endured conditions that would have killed most people in a matter of days. Medical professionals marveled at her resilience, but Annette knew there was more to it than just physical endurance. She believed her survival had been guided by something greater. Annette's story quickly gained attention. Reporters and journalists wanted to know every detail of the crash, her survival, and what it felt like to be the lone survivor. But as she recounted her experience, Annette found herself talking less about the crash itself and more about what she had felt during her near-death experience. She didn't just survive, she had been transformed. It was during this time that Annette began to reflect on the larger questions of life and purpose. She thought about the message she had received during her near-death experience. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. What did it mean? Was it a message for her alone, or was it something she was meant to share with the world? In her quest for answers, Annette found herself drawn to ideas she had never fully considered before. She began to read about spirituality, science, and the intersection between the two. This is where Elon Musk unexpectedly entered the picture. Annette came across interviews with Elon Musk, the visionary entrepreneur known for his groundbreaking work in space exploration, electric cars, and artificial intelligence. Musk often spoke about humanity's purpose, the future of our species, and the need to look beyond Earth for survival. His questions about the meaning of life resonated deeply with Annette. She felt a strange connection to his ideas, as though her experience in the light during her near-death encounter mirrored the larger questions Musk was asking on a global scale. Elon Musk once said, "The future of humanity depends on us expanding our consciousness and becoming a multiplanetary species." Annette couldn't help but see parallels between his vision and the message she had received during her near-death experience. She began to believe that her survival wasn't just about her own life. It was about contributing to a larger purpose, a collective awakening of humanity. Annette often wondered, was the light she saw during her near-death experience a glimpse of a higher dimension, one that connects all of us, even across time and space? Was it possible that Musk's work in pushing the boundaries of science and technology was part of that same cosmic plan? It was a question that both haunted and inspired her. Annette's survival wasn't just a miracle, it was a wake-up call. And as she continued to recover and rebuild her life, she made it her mission to share her story with the world, not just as a tale of endurance, but as a reminder of the profound connection between all of us, the fleeting nature of life and the eternal power of love. She felt a calling to inspire others, to make them think not only about survival, but about purpose, spirituality, and the legacy we leave behind. Her connection to Elon Musk's vision was just beginning to unfold, and it would soon lead her to insights that would forever change the way she viewed her own journey and the future of humanity. Annette's journey of understanding her survival went far beyond what she could have imagined in those first days after the crash. Each day brought new reflections and realizations, as if her near-death experience, NDE, had opened a door to a deeper understanding of life. The light she had seen, the love she had felt, it stayed with her, like a beacon guiding her through the complexities of recovery and the immense questions of why she was still here. She often thought about the message that had been imprinted on her soul during the NDE. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. These words weren't just comforting, they felt like instructions, a call to action. But how was she supposed to act on them? What did eternal love truly mean in a world filled with pain, loss, and struggle? Annette wrestled with these questions, determined to find meaning in what had happened to her. At first, Annette's focus was on survival, healing her body, processing her grief, and navigating the overwhelming media attention that followed her rescue. But as the months turned into years, she began to see her story not just as a tale of tragedy and endurance, but as something more profound. People wanted to know how she had managed to stay alive, what kept her going in the jungle. When she told them about the light she had seen and the message she had received, they listened with rapt attention, often moved to tears. It wasn't just her survival that inspired them, It was the clarity and hope she carried from her experience. Annette became a source of wisdom for those around her. Her friends, family, and even strangers sought her advice, wanting to know how she had found peace after such a harrowing ordeal. She spoke about the importance of love, not just romantic love, but the kind of love that connects us all. She talked about forgiveness, letting go of anger, and finding joy in the smallest moments. These weren't just ideas she had read in a book. They were truths she had felt in the light, truths she believed were universal. But Annette also felt a deep pull toward understanding the broader implications of her experience. She wanted to know how her near-death encounter fit into the larger questions of existence. Why are we here? What is our purpose? Is there something that connects us all? Something beyond religion, beyond science, something that ties the physical and the spiritual together? These questions led her to explore new ideas, and it was during this search that she came across Elon Musk. At first, she was intrigued by his bold vision for the future. His ideas about space exploration, sustainable energy, and the potential for artificial intelligence were captivating. But as she listened to his interviews and read his thoughts, she began to notice something deeper in his words. Musk wasn't just a scientist or an entrepreneur, he was a philosopher, a dreamer, someone who was grappling with the same questions she was. Musk often spoke about humanity's responsibility to ensure its survival, not just for the sake of existing, but to create a future that was meaningful and enduring. He talked about how the challenges we face, climate change, resource depletion, the fragility of our planet, demand that we think beyond ourselves. His vision of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species wasn't just about escaping Earth. It was about expanding what it means to be human, about creating a legacy that would last long after any one of us was gone. Musk's drive to ensure humanity's survival isn't just technological, it's deeply personal. Annette sees it as a manifestation of the same eternal love she felt in the light, a love that calls us to protect and cherish life. Annette saw in Musk's vision a reflection of the message she had received during her NDE. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. To her, Musk's work wasn't just about technology, it was about love in its broadest sense, the love for humanity, the love for future generations, the love for possibility. She began to see the connection between her experience and his mission. Both were about transcending the limitations of the present to create something that would endure, something that would matter. This realization gave Annette a renewed sense of purpose. She started incorporating Musk's ideas into her talks, drawing parallels between the spiritual truths she had experienced and the scientific advancements Musk was pursuing. "The light I saw wasn't just about heaven," she would say. "It was about what we can achieve here on Earth. It was about connection, creation, and the infinite potential of love." Her audiences were fascinated. For many, particularly older listeners, the idea that spirituality and science could coexist was a revelation. They were inspired by Annette's ability to bridge these two worlds, to show how a deeply personal experience like her NDE could connect to something as vast and ambitious as humanity's future. Her words gave them hope, not just for their own lives, but for the world as a whole. Annette began to think of herself as a messenger, someone who had been given a glimpse of a greater truth and tasked with sharing it. She didn't claim to have all the answers, but she believed her survival wasn't an accident. The light she had seen, the love she had felt, and the message she had received were all part of something bigger than herself. And she was determined to honor that by living a life of purpose and helping others find their own. Her connection to Elon Musk became a key part of her story, not because she had met him or worked with him directly, but because his vision symbolized something she deeply believed in. The idea that we are all part of a greater journey, one that requires both faith and action. Annette often said, The future isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about leaving a legacy of love, hope, and possibility for the generations that come after us. As she continued to share her story, Annette felt more certain than ever that her near-death experience wasn't just a personal miracle, it was a glimpse into the potential of humanity itself. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. And through her journey, she was determined to show the world how these words could guide us all toward a brighter, more connected future. Annette's journey didn't just touch hearts, it began to reshape lives. The growing attention around her story, her book, and her public appearances turned her into a global symbol of resilience, hope, and spiritual awakening. People from all corners of the world, from the United States to Europe, from bustling cities to quiet villages, reached out to her with letters, emails, and personal stories. They shared how her experiences mirrored their own struggles, how her survival and transformation inspired them to find meaning in their lives. Her book, Turbulence, a true story of survival, became a bestseller in multiple countries, translated into several languages to meet the demand of her growing international audience. It was more than just a recounting of the crash and its aftermath. It was a deeply reflective work that wove together the physical, emotional, and spiritual threads of her life. Readers were drawn to the raw honesty with which Annette described her pain, her doubts, and her search for purpose. What set the book apart, however, was its universal message. Annette didn't write just for survivors or those who had faced life-threatening experiences. She wrote for anyone who had ever felt lost, broken, or uncertain about their place in the world. The lessons I learned in the jungle weren't just about survival, she wrote. They were about living, truly living, with love, purpose, and gratitude. In Turbulence, a true story of survival, Annette also writes, "The jungle was merciless, but it was also a mirror. In its silence, I found my strength. In its chaos, I found my purpose." Readers around the world found themselves reflecting on their own struggles and triumphs. The book sparked a wave of invitations for Annette to speak at conferences, universities, spiritual retreats, and even corporate events. Her ability to connect with people across diverse settings made her an in-demand speaker. One of her most memorable appearances was at a global resilience summit held in Geneva, where she stood alongside some of the most influential thought leaders of the time. The audience of thousands listened in hushed silence as she described not only the crash, but also the light she had seen, the love she had felt, and the message she had carried with her ever since. Annette's speech at the summit became a viral sensation, shared widely across social media and news platforms. Clips of her talking about the eternal nature of love and the importance of human connection resonated deeply, particularly with older audiences who were grappling with questions of legacy and purpose. Her words were clear, profound, and deeply personal. "I survived not because I was strong, but because I was loved. Love is what carried me through those 8 days in the jungle, and love is what continues to guide me today. It's the one thing that will never fade, never fail, and never end." Her presence in the media grew exponentially. Major outlets featured her in interviews and profiles, and her story was covered in newspapers, magazines, and online platforms. Television networks invited her to share her journey on programs watched by millions. Each time she brought a fresh perspective, emphasizing the lessons she had learned and the ways they applied to everyone's life, regardless of age, background, or circumstance. She was particularly passionate about reaching older audiences, knowing how deeply her message resonated with those who often felt unseen or unimportant. "You are not forgotten," she said in one widely viewed interview. "No matter your age, no matter your past, your life has meaning. Every day you wake up is a chance to share your light with the world. It doesn't matter if it's through a grand gesture or a quiet act of kindness, it all matters. You matter. As her influence grew, Annette began to expand her work. She collaborated with grief counselors, trauma specialists, and mental health professionals to create workshops and programs designed to help others navigate loss and find hope. She partnered with non-profits focused on aiding survivors of natural disasters, sharing her story to inspire others to persevere in the face of overwhelming odds. One of her most impactful initiatives was the creation of a foundation dedicated to spreading her message of love and resilience. The foundation funded projects ranging from building support networks for trauma survivors to organizing community events that fostered connection and compassion. Annette herself was deeply involved, often attending events and speaking directly to those whose lives had been touched by her work. Her connection to Elon Musk's vision also deepened over time. Though they never worked together directly, Annette often referred to Musk's work as a tangible representation of the ideas she believed in: hope, legacy, and the power of humanity to create something eternal. She attended conferences where Musk spoke, sometimes sitting in the audience, other times as a fellow speaker. After one event, where Musk discussed the need for humanity to dream beyond Earth, Annette was asked about the connection between her story and his vision. "Elon Musk is building the future," she said, "and I believe that future isn't just about technology or survival. It's about love. It's about ensuring that the light we carry as individuals becomes a light we carry as a species. My near-death experience showed me that love is the foundation of everything, and when I see the work Musk is doing, I see that same foundation driving his vision." Her perspective brought a unique spiritual dimension to conversations about science, progress, and humanity's potential. She began to write about the intersection of these ideas, contributing articles and essays that explored how science and spirituality could work together to create a brighter future. Her writings became widely read, influencing not only individuals, but also organizations and policymakers who were grappling with questions about the future of humanity. Annette's influence extended into unexpected places. She was invited to speak at universities, addressing students who were just beginning their journeys into adulthood. She also became a regular guest at gatherings for seniors, where she offered encouragement and wisdom to those reflecting on their lives. "It's never too late to shine your light," she told them. "The love you've given, the lives you've touched, they are your legacy, and that legacy is eternal." Despite her growing fame, Annette remained deeply grounded. She continued to live in New York, finding joy in the simple moments of daily life, walking through Central Park, spending time with loved ones, and writing in her quiet home office. She often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the wreckage of a plane crash in the Vietnamese jungle to the hearts of millions around the world. In her later years, Annette began working on a second book, one that explored the deeper spiritual truths she had discovered through her experiences. It was a more reflective and philosophical work, aimed at helping readers connect with their own inner light. She spent hours writing, pouring her heart into every page, determined to leave behind something that would inspire others for generations to come. Her final message, whether spoken on stage, written in her books, or shared in quiet conversations, was always the same. Life is fleeting, but love is eternal. The light I saw isn't something reserved for the afterlife. It's here, now, in every act of kindness, every connection we make, and every dream we pursue. Carry that light, share it, and trust that together we can create a legacy that will shine forever. Annette Herfkens didn't just survive a plane crash. She became a beacon of hope, a guide for those searching for meaning, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found. Her story continues to inspire, proving that love truly is eternal, and that each of us has the power to make the world a brighter place. Annette's story challenges us all. How will you carry your light forward? What legacy of love will you leave behind? Her story continues to inspire, proving that love truly is eternal. Resilience is a gift we all share, and every one of us has the power to make the world a brighter, more loving place.